Hey there, Greg. Thanks very much for your channel. Maybe you can give me some advice when looking for a job. Have you got any recommendations for that nerve-wracking job interview? How do I make sure I really get the results that I'm looking for? I understand that we've only got seconds in which to make the biggest impact, but I'm feeling really nervous about just making that right impact right from the get-go. If you've got any words of advice, thanks very much.
Ade. Hi, can you see me? Can you see and hear me?
I think we can see and hear you now.
Sorry, I was on another computer and I was talking away literally for like 10, 15 minutes, not knowing that nobody could see or hear anything that I was saying. So if there are people still online, thank you for hanging around. Ade, how are you?
I'm very good, Greg. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good. Sorry about the technical hassles. I was on another computer, literally logged on to this and have been talking away happily to myself, wondering what's gone wrong. So a big apology from me, and thanks everyone that is still here for hanging around and sticking with me. And as you can see, people have been putting some questions in the chat saying we can't hear you. I hadn't seen those questions. I was just talking away happily. Ade, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're talking about jobs in public health. Again, I'm gonna download this video and just edit it and re-stick it on YouTube when it's done, because it's going to be very messy. My name's Greg Martin. Ade, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly? Tell people about who you are, what you're up to, what's the lowdown, what's the word on the street?
Yeah, hi everyone. Ade Adeyemi here, based in London, from Nigeria. I am a global health policy expert. I own the website globalhealthjobs.com, helping people connect to global health opportunities around the world.
Okay, fantastic. And there's a couple of things that I just want to highlight to people. Firstly, if you have a question, you can obviously stick it in the chat. Happy days. We'll try and read those questions as they've come up and respond to them. But Something else you can do, and this won't be live in the show, but we'll stick in subsequent shows, is you can submit a video question. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. All you do, take your cell phone, scan in the QR code that's over there, scan that QR code in. It will take you to a form that from that form on your phone, you'll be able to both record and submit a video question. Now, don't just submit questions. What about submitting something about an organization that you love working for? So say I work for UNICEF or the WHO and I love it because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm working in a particular country and it's a fantastic place to be and it's really exciting and I love the work that we're doing. I'll tell you why this is quite a useful thing to do, because we'll bring it onto the show. It sends a signal to other people. It gives people ideas. Someone else watching this might think, hey, that's great. I would love to go and work there. I didn't think of that. Or that's a great organization. I'm going to look into working there. Or maybe you're watching this and you are a hiring manager of an organization and you want to encourage somebody to apply for a job at your organization. Happy days, absolutely. Boom shakalaka. Come send us a video. We'll stick it on here and get that up and running. No problem at all. Okay. And so with that in mind, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring in our first video question that we've got. And Ade, perhaps you and I can both respond to this. And I'm going to play it, and then maybe you give us first stab at your thoughts and feelings, and then I'll follow up after that.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Hey there, Greg. Thanks very much for your channel. Maybe you can give me some advice when looking for a job. Have you got any recommendations for that nerve-wracking job interview? How do I make sure I really get the results that I'm looking for? I understand that we've only got seconds in which to make the biggest impact, but I'm feeling really nervous about just making that right impact right from the get-go. If you've got any words of advice, thanks very much.
Okay, happy days. Ade, what are your thoughts, feelings, concerns, pontifications, words of wisdom from London?
We could spend a whole hour just on this own question. I mean, you know, there are many different dimensions to think about. If the interview is in person, if it's remote, how to make the right impression, coming in with the right energy. There are so many things to think about. I think let's think about if it's remote, as most interviews are these days. Research the organization really helps, understanding who the organization is. If you can network with people, that's always helpful. If you know someone within that organization, or if you know someone who knows someone within that organization, try understanding the style of questions. And for some public agencies, departments of health, ministries of health, or multilateral organizations, there's often a standard format for their interviews. So knowing someone who's been through that process is always very helpful, because most often than not, that standard process will be the same within the last 3 or so years. So understanding the style of questions and prepping yourself on that is really good. But, you know, most interviews follow a similar format where they want to understand who you are, your experiences, and what you can do in the role. So prepping those questions and being able to answer in what we call a STAR format is really helpful. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So you want to put your answers in a very structured way so it's easy for the other person to follow. You want to explain what the situation was when you're answering a question, the task that, you know, what you had to do, the action that you took. And in most interviews, it's really important that you use I statements. So you don't say we did this, because then it's hard for the examiner or the interviewer to understand what did you do rather than what did other people do.
Yeah.
So situation, task, action, and then result. What was the outcome of your intervention, what you did? Those are very high level things to do in interviews. But as I say, we could spend another hour going into interviews.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, actually. I mean, you've literally taken the words out of my mouth, and I think you've hit all of the high notes. One or two things that I'll also say to people with respect to interviews is preparation is key. Take time. Like, I even take leave. I take some annual leave if I've got a job interview coming up. I take leave and I prepare like crazy. I learn as much about the organization as I can. I read the terms of reference of the job again and again and again so that I'm super comfortable with it. And I know what the job's about so that I can, in the heat of the moment in an interview, I can formulate my answers so that I'm directly responding to the requirements of the job and the actual things that they're wanting the person, the successful candidate, to do. Going into the interview, you know, the day of, get a nice strong cup of coffee if you drink caffeine, relax before you go in there, smile. Don't do what I'm doing right now. By the way, at the moment, I'm looking at a tiny little laptop. I'm stooped up over the whole thing. This isn't like interview style what you want to do is you want to have a camera at eye level. You want to be sitting up nice and straight. Look at the camera. Don't look at the screen. Make eye contact if you can. This is if you're doing an online interview. Get a good microphone if you can. Look and sound your best. Have like a nice, simple, plain background. Don't use a big dark green like I've got at the moment. I've literally just shoveled myself into a corner of the room over here. A nice plain background like Addie's got over there. That's really nice. Just get everything flowing in the right direction for you. When I'm asked a question in an interview, this is just a little bit of what I do. Not everybody does the same thing. I try to just take a breath and reformulate the subject matter of the question into a kind of one or two major headings that I'm going to use to address in my answer. So for example, if I get asked, look, tell us about a time when you demonstrated leadership experience, for example, I answer that by saying, thanks for the question. And I'm going to tell you about work and experience in which I demonstrated this competency under the headings of, or, the areas that I want to address are, operational leadership, strategic leadership, and thought leadership, for example. I mean, it might not be those three, but the point is I'll give 2 or 3 headings that I'm going to talk under, and then I'll start talking. It gives me a second just to take a breath and formulate my answer and kind of have a bit of direction. It also sends a very strong message to the panel of people interviewing you, that you've thought about this issue, that you've got a clear idea of it in your head, and that you've got your answer is going to have a nice plan to it. They need to sit back, relax, and enjoy. And it's not always easy to do that in the heat of an interview, is to kind of be that kind of clear-minded that you can do that. This is why you have to practice. In the build-up to an interview, get your friends, family, colleagues, anybody you can to practice asking you difficult interview questions. Get used to thinking on the spot, answering questions that you might not have expected. The more you practice interviewing in the build-up to the interview, the easier it's going to be on the day. So, my last piece of advice about interviews, and sorry, we're talking about interviews a lot, but I mean, look, any job that you're going to get, a stepping stone to that job is going to be doing an interview. So we might as well, make this something that we talk about and get right. At the end of an interview, they always say to you, do you have any questions? You can ask a question if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have one, fine. I don't ask a question. I rather say to them, I don't have a question, but I've got a closing statement. Would you mind if I made a statement? 2 reasons for that. Number one, if you ask a question, I find it difficult to imagine questions where you're really going to win points. I mean, you've just been speaking to them for an hour. You're unlikely to ask some incredibly insightful question that kind of really sways the whole thing, and they suddenly realize what an absolute genius you are, and they'd be a fool not to hire you. Your question's unlikely to be that brilliant. I mean, you might have a brilliant question, happy days, more power to you if you do. The worst case scenario is you ask a question and they don't really know the answer to, and it becomes a bit awkward, and the whole thing stumbles about, or you just ask a crappy question. None of that is good. If you say, I don't have a question, but I've got a statement, they're not going to mind. And then you get to choose the mood music that you leave the room to. So at the end of an interview, say, look, I really love this work. I think I'd be a great candidate for this job. I think I'd do a great job, and I really want it. Or something like that. You just tell them that you want the job, that you think you'll be good at it. Just build yourself up a little bit. You're not answering a question. You get to kind of just say a few things about yourself, and then thank them for the interview, and then you're out of there. That's the last thing they're going to hear from you. That sets the tone of how it is that they think about you while it is they discuss your interview scores against the various competencies that they're marking you on. So that's my advice. You take it, leave it. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't mind.
Really innovative, Greg. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've always done that, actually, just because I've never been able to think of a decent question. So I've always done that, and I've always felt good about it. At the end of it, like when I walk out, I kind of think and that closing statement that I give at the end of an interview, I have practiced that. I've practiced it. Like, I've thought about it carefully. It's not like I'm not thinking on the spot there. I've anticipated doing that, and I've thought through the wording very carefully, and I've practiced it again and again and again. So it comes out really nice and smooth and crisp and to the point and punchy, and then I'm out of there. And I think it creates a good impression. So that's my little piece of advice about interviewing. Now we've got a couple of there's more video questions that have come in. I'm just going to have a look at what's come. I'm on this tiny screen. I can hardly see anything because I'm not at my regular computer right now. Thanks for organizing Q&A. You're most welcome. Hi, and your guest. Happy days. Oh, happy days to you. Okay. We may have missed. There's been a lot of comments in and I can bring questions up. So they've, there's this one, Greg enjoyed your data analysis, our videos. Okay, okay. I'm glad you enjoy them. I love doing them. Send the questions in, and we'll see them as they come in. I know there's been a lot of questions or comments in the comments saying that you couldn't hear or see me or Ade because of I don't know what technical. It's on this other computer, and I think there's a firewall. It was my work computer, so that was somehow stopping this whole thing from working. But anyway, here we are. Happy days. Next video question. Let's bring that up.
Hi, Greg. Hi, David. Thank you for organizing the calls. Super helpful. Quick question. How cautious should people be using AI during the application process? We know that some companies have started to use AI detectors. So just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? And secondly, I know you talked about internship or voluntary work as entry points into the global health space. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit more about roles that are advertised only for nationals only. Thank you.
Okay, so two questions there. Two interesting thoughts. The first, we'll take them each one at a time. The first question about using AI in preparing for an interview or preparing for a job application. I think it's fine to use the AI to help you formulate your thoughts. So if you're applying for a job, and I would be quite comfortable taking PDFs or reports that an organization has written, maybe the terms of reference from the job, dropping them into ChatGPT, dropping in my own CV, and asking ChatGPT to help me think about questions that I might be asked, to help me think through what might be appropriate answers to give. That there's nothing wrong with using these large language models to help you formulate your thoughts, as a sounding board, as a way to generate ideas that you might not have thought of, etc., etc. I wouldn't use it to write the cover letter, for example, or and you can, but if you do, there's not. I think this is the way people are going to be creating stuff in the future. So we can't fight it, but if you get ChatGPT or one of these other large language models to help you write your application letter, definitely take it and make it your own. Okay, go through it carefully, word for word, and make the changes that only you would know to make, because you want it to be your voice, your style. If it's, I find, text that's generated by these large language models, when I read stuff it doesn't ever sound like me. And make it your own, bring your own personality and thoughts and ideas into it. I don't know, any thoughts there, Ade?
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. I would say to use, large language models like ChatGPT as a starting board. Most organizations haven't fully grappled with the use of AI in recruitment, so they may not have policies advertised, but they may then actually be using, plagiarism checkers, whatever, to check. And some people will just be familiar with it and will be able to kind of spot ChatGPT language, and they might bias against that. So I'd be very careful with using it to the full extent. And also, most of these are accurate, but they're not fully accurate, and they might take some of what you've put in your CV or in a statement and reword it in a way that may not actually reflect the truth. So do go through whatever you use with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it is in your language, because it will be clear if there's a big disconnect between what you've used in the cover letter and what's naturally, that you can recall from your memory. Examiners, interviews, I think we're able to spot that from afar, and you could be in a bit of trouble. But, AI is the future, so I think it shows initiative. If you use it to structure your thoughts, to kind of see things that you might have missed, but let it not be the full basis of your answer applications.
Yeah, and you want to stand out from the competition, and if everybody's just getting their answers straight out of ChatGPT, you're going to sound like everybody else. So bring yourself into the conversation. You're going to know yourself, your history, your experiences, your CV much better than any AI could, because you've lived it. And and the other thing about if you the more content you create yourself, the more of the sort of feeling and emotion and passion that you have for the subject matter that's going to come across. So use AI, but use it cautiously and sparingly, and bring as much of yourself to the conversation as possible. I think that's the bottom line. The second part of that question was interesting. It was about internships as a starting point, which there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, I did an internship at the WHO more than 20 years ago, and I am still good friends with a lot of the people that I met at that point in time, and it was a great stepping stone into other career points for me. Part of the question asked about these internships or these jobs that are where, and I know they do this at the WHO. There's the one category of entry level job where they specify that it has to be a national of the country that's sponsoring that job. I can't remember what those jobs are called. We talked about them in one of the previous videos. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done about that. So if that WHO position has been sponsored by Italy and they specify that it's only for Italian nationals, it is what it is. It's a little bit of a pity, but I suppose there's nothing we can do about that. I kind of wish they wouldn't do that. I think, yeah, do you want to jump in?
If I might just come in there, yeah, there are, HR employment laws and legislations which unfortunately prevent an organization like WHO or whatever a multilateral NGO from having positions that might be open to all citizens. There are these payment, tax, employment laws that some organizations can't get around. So there is often a legal reason why they can't be open to all nationals. I'm sure if they would, or if they could, they would want to open it to all. But sometimes there are just legal challenges to open it to everyone.
Yeah, and we'll I haven't got it all prepared at the moment, so maybe in a subsequent episode of this I'll go through it again. But there are different categories, particularly of UN agencies. There's different categories of entry-level jobs, and there usually is a category that does try and facilitate basically people from low and middle income countries. Which are the people that are from countries that usually don't have sort of a national sponsor behind particular jobs and that sort of thing. So I don't have all of that kind of to hand right now, but I do promise to kind of get back and try and bring some of the detail of that back into one of these conversations, because it is kind of quite interesting. We've got, now let me bring this back. We've got some questions here. Mary says, what is a promising concentration in global health for a young clinician interested in public health? So it's interesting that you're a clinician, which kind of changes the question slightly, because I think there's so many areas of public health and global health that are really interesting, and there's a strong future. But I think as a clinician, there's one or two that maybe are coming to focus slightly more for me. And the one is antimicrobial resistance. And let me just say, the caveat here is if you're not a clinician and you're in public health and you've come in a different direction, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's absolutely opportunities for you to work in antimicrobial resistance as well. But as a clinician, you would bring a little bit of extra clinical insight into a lot of what is driving antimicrobial resistance, especially from sort of prescribing point of views. There are obviously other drivers that are important, and everyone needs to get involved with that. But antimicrobial resistance is going to become an increasingly important problem. And I do think that there's going to be increasingly programs and efforts and funding and all sorts of projects afoot to try and address AMR. So if I was a young clinician getting into public health at this point in time, that would be high on my list of things that I might be thinking about getting involved in. The other is, of course, climate change. That's not going to go away. That's just going to get worse. And it has all sorts of implications and ramifications for health. And so if you want to think about an area in which there's going to be increasing opportunities to get involved with, AMR, climate change definitely are high on the list of things that I would be thinking about. Are there any thoughts from yourself?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I would definitely advocate for those two. On climate health as well, there's further subdivisions you could go down. The impacts of climate health on human health, and also that kind of One Health dimension of planetary health, animal health, human health. So One Health would also be an area to focus on. Two other areas just to add to the list, I feel as emergent areas in the future in global public health would be on non-communicable diseases. I think that's an area that we see increasing prevalence of, and also mental health, of an underserved area, but I think there's increasing attention on that. So that would be interesting areas for people to...
Definitely agree. I think mental health has increasingly been identified as one of the major contributors to the global burden of disease. It's historically gone, it's historically been not gotten the attention that I think it deserves. And, and part of the reason for that is because big funding agencies like to fund things where there's nice definitive outcomes that they can count. How many people with TB got treated? And of course, that's important. But that's attractive if you're a funder, because you can say, like, for X number of dollars, we saved X number of lives. Boom shakalaka, double thumbs up, high five, everybody's happy. Mental health, it's much more difficult to quantify the impact of your investment. And so it becomes a little bit more difficult to justify, and it's just become a little bit more messy. But increasingly, I think that there's an awareness and a realization of the importance of intervening early and dealing with mental health issues. So and an example, I'm working in a role where one of the areas that I'm working in at the moment is suicide prevention in Ireland. And this has become an increasingly high profile issue that we need to address. And there's a lot of energy behind it in a way that might not have been the case in the past. And I'll just add to that by saying that the work, the people that are already working in the space, I'm kind of new to it, are absolutely amazing. The work that they're doing is fantastic. So I feel very privileged to be getting involved with that kind of work myself. A couple of other questions are popping in. Let's just see. We've got... Here we've got, let's see. Hi, Greg. I have a master's in public administration. Will a certificate in health education specialist be helpful with federal jobs, CDC, HHS? I'm currently working with SSA. Any suggestions? I don't know all of those organizations terribly well, but I would say this just off the bat, reading the sort of sense of the question. You've got a master's in public administration, which is great because I think it means that you bring a lot of skills to the table. So happy days. I've worked with people with masters in public administration, and I'm very conscious of the value proposition. So excellent. Now you're saying, should you layer on top of that a certificate in health education or anything like that? And I think absolutely, if you come with that kind of combination, so the master's in public health and in public administration, which doesn't have necessarily a health component to it, you're stapling on top of that some sort of education that indicates that you've got skills and knowledge in the area of health. And in the suggestion that you've made is health education, I think it provides a very nice combination of skills that makes you potentially very attractive. It is true that many public health jobs have as an entry requirement that you have a master's in public health, but that's not always the case. So a lot of these organizations like the CDC, for example, may have some sort of educational function, I'm using education specifically because you said a certificate in health education. They may have an education function where they're looking for a particular kind of person, but they're not going to require that you have an MPH. So that could work. I like the combination qualifications. I did a similar thing. So after my medical degree, I did a master's in public health, and then later on, I did a master's in business administration and MBA. And I've definitely found that combination of skills that come from the different disciplines to be useful. I don't know that doing the MBA has necessarily helped me in getting jobs. That's just the honest truth, because I've never really applied for a job where having an MBA has been one of the requirements. But I do find that in my day-to-day work, the skills that I got in the MBA have always been terribly useful. Ade, any thoughts, feelings?
Yeah. I mean, let me build off from the MBA bit first of all. I've got an executive MBA as well, and I thought that it would be useful, particularly for the leadership, administrative management part of healthcare that I wanted to get into. It's not been required in some of the roles that I've gone for. It's not even been essential or desirable. But I think at some point, particularly when I'm hopefully in a more profile leadership role, it could be helpful. So I think that's one thing to consider. On Morgan's point, I'm familiar with some of the acronyms there. I think it sounds like it's US. HHS is Health and Human Services, the Department of Health and Human Services, and SSA, I think, is the Social Security Administration. I agree with all that you've said. I wonder, it might be helpful for Morgan to look at the kind of jobs that they would have liked to have gone for. And if you kind of get 5, and this can apply for anyone really, if you get 5 or so jobs that you really like, and you look at the requirements, particularly on the education side, and if they have a common theme that they all require, there's often an essential category where you must have this to be able to pass the stage. And there's another category of desirable, recommended things that would be good to have. But look at the essential stuff if it is there, and see what you do require. If it's an MPH, a Master's in Public Health, then you might want to think about that if you have the time and resources. But sometimes, I mean, I think the certificate in itself demonstrates a passion and a specialism in health, which is always helpful. You've already got the Master's, so a combination kind of sets you apart and makes you unique. But often just profiling the kind of jobs you would have liked to have gone for. And some sites as well will like have archives, so even if the job isn't active, it's always just useful to look in the past and see what's been advertised, what you'd have liked to go for, what they're looking for, and how your education profile stacks up to that, or if you might need something else to support that.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks very much for that. I'm going to bring in one of the other video questions, and this is just a reminder, if you're watching this, scan the barcode in that's at the top sort of left of the screen. I think it's the left. That should, I never know if these things are mirrored. Okay, scan that in and you can submit a video, not just a video question, but maybe just tell us about an organization that you're working for, that you love, or a place that you're working in public health that you love. I would really enjoy bringing that sort of stuff into the show. I think it'll add a lot of value. Okay, another question.
Hey, Greg, sorry, a second question. I've heard LinkedIn is a massively popular way of promoting yourself. What recommendations do you have for LinkedIn? Is that a place where I can secure future job positions? What would you recommend regarding that? Thank you.
Okay, a second question from a very distinctly South African accent. I can tell them a mile away. Look, I use LinkedIn a lot in terms of a place to identify colleagues that I might want to reach out to and expand my network. So I think LinkedIn is a really interesting place. A couple of little nuggets. If you're at that point in your you're looking for your first job, or you're looking for a change in career, and you sort of think, well, this search for a new job might take 3 to 6 months. It's usually, the search for a job is usually kind of done in sort of increments of a defined period of time. So for that defined period of time, subscribe to the LinkedIn Premium, whatever it's called. There's a version of LinkedIn that you pay.
The LinkedIn Premium.
Yeah, and so you're not paying forever and ever, but for the period of time that you're on the hunt, I think it's worth doing, because they add in a whole lot of features that I think that bring a lot of color to your search. You can reach out to people that you might not have been able to otherwise. You can do different kinds of searches. I saw on the computer that I was going to be doing this on, so I had to swap onto this computer, so I don't have it all set up. But I did see that there's all sorts of AI features built into LinkedIn when you're doing a job search. So it can look at a particular job and give you firstly, it can find jobs that it thinks you might be a good candidate for in the job section. And then it gives you sort of advice. I haven't really tried it, but what I was going to do is I was going to do it live on the show, like for the first time, sort of click on the AI feature and see what it does. And maybe I'll do that like next week. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to click on that feature. I'm going to wait until I'm doing it in the context of one of these live streams, and we'll sort of explore and discover what LinkedIn AI does for you in the context of job searches together. So I think that'll be quite fun. So tune in, next week, if we do this next week. Ade, if you're available, please come back. It's a lot of fun having you here. So I think that's a good question. Yourself, Ade, any experience on the LinkedIn front as a place?
Yeah, the AI in LinkedIn is actually quite interesting. I think they've got a way to go. I think it's not as smart yet, or maybe they just don't actually have a critical mass of job opportunities yet. But I'm sure it'll be fun to delve into properly. I'm a big supporter of kind of raising profile and advocating on LinkedIn. I think with what we've seen of some of the less, tasteful conversations on Twitter and X, people are increasingly moving to LinkedIn as a platform for conversation and sharing. So I think you will have great profile and visibility there. I think what most people have to do, if you're not an outwardly going person, you just have to kind of get over that shyness. And I would just encourage you to put stuff out there. If it's linked to an activity, great. So if you've done something recently, or you've been to a workshop, or you've had a meeting, it's great to, use that as a launch pad to talk about something. And so try and take pictures if you're in workshops or if you're in places, to then help, make your post more attractive. If there isn't a particular activity, it's fine just to even just muse your thoughts. I think obviously you want to keep it a bit corporate. I see some people share pictures of, their very private social lives and babies. I'm not personally a fan of that, but if you know anything to kind of get attention sometimes. But yes, if there isn't an activity, even just musing, something has happened with something on the global stage, the pandemic accords or IHR negotiations, or there's something with MPOX, and your own take on it will demonstrate your desire, your passion in this space. People are recruiting on LinkedIn. People are looking for people who are interested in areas in your particular niche. If something's happened, that's another great way to communicate. The last thing I would say on the LinkedIn piece as well is that, it's getting an increasingly small world. So even people you've worked with before, they could see you're active in this space. And there might be other opportunities in other places you don't know about. So just communicating out there, keeping yourself in people's minds is always helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just the advice I usually give to people about platforms like LinkedIn, it's a great place for networking. You can identify people that are sometimes quite senior that you might want to reach out to. If you reach out to somebody and you send them a message and you don't know them professionally, so that's sort of an introductory message, the advice I usually give is this: keep the message short, right? Because if you're sending a message to a busy person, they might be getting a lot of messages from all over the shop. They don't want to be reading paragraphs and paragraphs about when I was 12, I did this, and when I finished high school, and honestly, I think it'll just annoy them more than anything. Keep it short. And I usually suggest this: add a question. So keep a short message that has a question that reflects on the work that they're doing, that they're involved with. And think about the question carefully, because you want to ask them a question that's easy to answer. Okay. Right.
And so, could I just add to that, Greg? If you are getting in touch with a busy person that you want either to mentor you or to give you a connection, it's just very concise, because again, they're quite busy, but make it very clear what you're asking, because I've received a lot of messages where it's long and the ask isn't clear, and why I should connect them with this person or speak to them for a mentorship conversation isn't. So an interesting question and quite short to the point, I would say.
And demonstrate a willingness to make a bit of effort. So what I've done this, by the way, I've done a PubMed search, found a paper that the person's written, read the paper, and then sent them a message sort of saying, listen, I read your paper on X, Y, and Z. I found it interesting, and I have a question. And I promise you, if a person sent me a message like that, 100% I would send a reply. Because firstly, I'd be flattered. They downloaded my paper, they took the time to read it and think about it, and they have an insightful question. They've sent me a message. 100% I'm sending a reply, and I'm going to thank them for reading the paper. And
I agree.
So make a bit of effort, and don't just send your CV randomly to people all over the shop. It'll just annoy them. Now there's been a couple more questions that are coming in, and I'm just trying to find. And a lot of them are quite similar. So I'll just pop two up in a row that are very similar. I've been a clinician for 25 years, and I'm involved in public health and interested in non-communicable disease. Can you help me find out how to get involved in Southeast Asia? Okay, so now that's not a part of the world that I know terribly well, but okay, we'll take that question together with, I've got a master's in public health and a bachelor's in nutrition with 2.5 years of experience in as a nutritional assistant, and I want to join the WHO or UNICEF. Could you please guide me and give me advice? Look, both of these questions are similar. With respect to the Southeast Asia, and if you were looking at, I don't know the sort of landscape in terms of NGOs or UN agencies, et cetera, in that neck of the woods. So you'd need to kind of look at that a little bit more carefully. Maybe one day we can do a sort of a landscaping exercise where we look specifically at different regions and what's available. I've never really done that so far, but it's not a bad idea. But the question about the WHO and UNICEF, and you've got 2.5 years experience, if you, and we don't have time to get into it today, but there are very specific and definitive timeframes that are required by all UN agencies that you need to have completed in terms of becoming eligible for particular kinds of jobs. 2.5 years actually is fine for some of the entry-level jobs. So there are some of the very entry-level jobs where 2 years is the requirement. So definitely, like it's just such a pity that I'm on this computer, not the other one. Otherwise, I'd just take you straight to the WHO website and show you how to find those jobs. But for kind of like P3 level and above, you really need 5 years of experience. You're kind of halfway there, you know. So see if you can get an entry-level experience job. But you know, getting a job at UNICEF or WHO isn't quite as easy as just going onto the website and putting in an application and kind of getting the job. I'll tell you why it's complicated. Quite often, these UN agencies already have a person, an incumbent, working in that particular role as a consultant, or somebody that's junior to that role that they're kind of wanting to promote and give, you know, a career stepping stone. They have to advertise the job. So the job's being advertised and all sorts of people are applying. And I know this isn't fair, but this is just the way the world is. But the people that are hiring have got someone in mind. And it's just unfortunate that this is the way the world works. So I know so many people that have applied for jobs at the WHO thinking like, that's the perfect job for me. I'm a great candidate. I tick all the boxes. I've got all the experience. I'm amazing. I would be the perfect person for that job. They apply and, you know, they just don't get the job, and they do it again and again and again, and they eventually become disheartened and they stop. My suggestion to people is very often, if you can, find a way to do some consulting work with the people that you'd like to get the job with, and let them get to know you as a personality. And, you know, when I worked at the WHO, I worked there for 2 years. I don't know that I knew anybody that had gotten a job there, that they just got the job cold, applying straight off the website, applied, sent their CV and did an interview, got the job and moved to Geneva. Like I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying in 2 years, I just never saw it happen. So it's, you know, it comes back to this idea of networking. Doing some consulting work, I think, is a huge stepping stone into that world, if that's really where you want to be. Consulting work's not that difficult to find. If you go to the WHO website, you can actually filter their job adverts by consultant work. And there are other ways to get it. You know, we'll do maybe a whole show where we just talk about consulting work. I think that's worth doing at some point. Ade, any thoughts about either of those two questions?
Yeah, on the clinical one, I think Dabasish has clarified 25 years.
Yeah.
I think for most clinicians, there will be some kind of association, college, or faculty that they can network within. And I think, you know, networking is one of the great tools to finding opportunities. So either if, you know, this person is a medic or a nurse or a pharmacist, there will be some kind of association of pharmacists in that region that might be a good first point of entry. I think the question specifically was on NCDs in Southeast Asia. There, in whatever country you're in particular, there will be different flavors of the NCDs that are kind of emerging. So I think it's worth understanding which ones are big trouble points for either your National Public Health Institute or your Ministry of Health, exploring that. On the WHO, I would agree with much of what Greg has said. Just to add that, you know, it is a very long, expensive road to engage, and if you don't have a backer, it can be hard. I would strongly encourage people, if possible, to try and engage in person, either at, you know, regional events, so PAHO, WHO Afro, WHO Euro. Those are you know, they often have regional in-person meetings, workshops, or conferences. If you join a number of newsletters, you can find access to those. Those are often ways to network with people as well, and to understand what's happening, and then to find consultant opportunities. Beyond WHO regional, there's also, you know, CPHI in Africa, Africa CDC events, Africa Health Tech Summit, Global Health Tech Summits. There's different summits and things. I would try and find ones in your local area and try and find your way there and network like crazy.
Yeah. A little piece of advice on the networking front. Bring some value to the conversation. So, if, you know, in the first instance, you might just reach out to a person, as we discussed, with like an interesting question or just some sort of easy, you know, simple, short, introductory, blah, blah, blah. Fine. You then might want to just take it a step further, and you might, like, I wouldn't recommend that if you've got a very sort of light touch professional relationship with a particular person in an organization, to then send them a message saying, I'm looking for a job, do you have a job? It's unlikely that right at that point in time, they happen to have an opening that fits perfectly with your CV, and, you know, they don't have any candidates, and it's just like, you know, serendipity and boom shakalaka, you've got a job. It could happen, but it's unlikely, right? I think what you want to do is develop a professional relationship with this and other people. And over time, the right opportunities will emerge. And what I would do in communicating with professionals that are kind of a little bit senior to yourself in these organizations is be saying at some point, look, if I'm available to do consulting work if you need a pair of hands on anything. And, you know, that sort of opens the door for them to sort of get back to you as and when there's a need. And very often they might be leading a team. Somebody's got a maternity leave, so there's a little gap and they're needing a pair of hands to help with something, or somebody left and there's a gap on the team. And you've said that you're available, that you're around, and they might just think of you and say, look, we actually need somebody for like 6 months. Would you mind, you know, stepping in? And that sort of thing does happen. And, you know, or you might even be more specific. And you might say, listen, I'm available. And if any of the work that you at the moment requires a systematic literature review, I can do that for you. Because the thing about lit review is everybody's always wanting them, because everybody wants an evidence base behind the work that they're doing. You know, they want to be able to defend the work that they're doing because there's a body of literature out there that underpins and informs their work, right? Nobody wants to do them because they're hard and take time. So if you are wanting an entry-level job, that's a great thing to offer. You know, if somebody came to me today and said, you know, would you need someone to give you a hand with a literature review? I'd be like, there's 12 things that I'm doing where I need like to kind of lean into the literature, and I haven't got the time to do it, like 100%. And so offering to help, you know, with something like a lit review, it's not fun, it's not sexy, but get your foot in the door. Do a great job with that, and suddenly you're on their radar. So bring some value to the conversation, and I think you've got a much better chance of that translating potentially into some consulting work, and then consulting work could be a stepping stone to an actual job in an organization. Now, I try to keep these to kind of about an hour. We've just gone past an hour, and I don't know if that's probably, and a big chunk of that got chewed up because I was like fussing around, not getting all of the technical hoopla right. But maybe we'll just do one or two more questions and then call it a day, just so that this doesn't go for too long. Let's just have a look. What have we got here? I'm clicking on a question. I haven't really read it very carefully yet, so apologies if this doesn't make any sense. Hi, Greg. Almost 3 years experience in clinical trials. I'm currently running my MPH program. I'd like to transition into a more practical public health role. Can you please advise? So it's quite a generic question, quite broad, but 3 years of experience in clinical trials, which is interesting. So you've got a strong
Greg.
research. Do you want to jump on that?
Yeah. So actually, one of my very first early jobs was in clinical trials, and so very familiar with this and have a passion. One thing I think the colleague wants to do, Olabanji, is maybe find a connection between the clinical trial and the funder. There will be a funder funding that trial and what they want to get out of it. And then, you know, that will have a direct public health implication. They're obviously doing some research with the trial. If you can help get into that space and you're in the midst of the trial, you're at the front line, you should be seeing emerging things about either the participants, data that's coming out. They will need some help if they don't have it already in translating that evidence into, okay, this is what we need to do, either to, you know, alter drug formulation or invest more in this area or do this intervention to affect these patients. If you can be part of that conversation, then I think you're onto a winner. As Greg kind of said earlier, in networking and in these conversations, if you can add value to what's already existing, then you will, you're onto a winner. You'll be needed. You'll be sought after. So that would be my advice. That, you know, try and speak to the funders, try and speak to your line managers or your superiors, your seniors, and see if you can add value from what you're seeing on the ground to what you think they're trying to aim for with, you know, behind the actual clinical trial.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm just going to put one last comment on, but then I'm going to ask the people that have asked questions that we haven't managed to get to. This is a nice excuse for me. Take your phone, scan in that QR code over there, and send us a video question, because you're much more likely to get our attention that way, because it's easy for me to kind of click on a video and bring it up. It's quite hard in the midst of a conversation to be reading the comments and chat, but it is, you know, like I'm doing my very best here. And it's by the way, Ade, it's lovely having you on the show. Like really appreciate you coming in. You've been absolutely fantastic to chat with.
No, glad to be here.
So Cass99, can you bring an HR person on for a discussion? Okay, it's difficult to know exactly what organizations are looking for these days. I absolutely agree. I think that's a great suggestion, and I will definitely try and do that. Between Ade and myself, I think we'll hunt around. I think finding both HR managers, I think we should bring an HR person onto this live stream and have them tell us a little bit about what happens behind the curtain on their side of the fence. That would be fence and curtain, sort of two metaphors in one there. And the second kind of person that I'd love to bring on here are some of the actual hiring managers. So if there's, you know, so there's a person that is themselves recruiting to have somebody on their team, have that person come on and talk a little bit about what it is that they're looking for, their process, what are the things that if they're interviewing candidates, what are the things that catch their eye and make them increasingly interested in that one candidate over another. So these are the things that I think will definitely do that. Thanks everyone for watching. Ade, thanks very much for joining. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for your patience for the first sort of 20 minutes of this. I think there was just a blank screen, and yet people stayed. So I am very appreciative of that. Otherwise, listen, everybody, have a great weekend. Don't ever change. Don't do drugs. Always do your best. Don't. Any final words of wisdom from yourself, Ade?
No, I mean, but just to say that there's so many comments and questions that we've missed that I'm absolutely eager to do this again soon. This has been fun.
Yeah, let's aim at next Friday. If everyone's available, I think I should be. We'll do this again, same time, same place next Friday. Send your video questions, comments, thoughts, and etc. Okay, everybody.